a time when Americans are facing a dual health care and affordability crisis, it's our responsibility as members of Congress to put our differences aside and to come together to bring down costs. This shouldn't be controversial. We've been hearing about the high costs, rising unemployment, and recession fears impacting Americans in every district. We cannot allow healthcare to be another thing that's out of reach. We have a chance to come together and to tackle these crises head on and to undo some of the damage within Republicans' big ugly law. Unless Congress acts, 15 million Americans will lose healthcare, and 24 million Americans who rely on the ACA could see their health insurance go up by 75%. In my district alone, nearly 400,000 people depend on Medicaid or receive a premium subsidy. Democrats are doing everything in our power to ensure the worst parts of the big ugly law don't become a reality for our constituents.
Already, we're hearing people talk about Charlie's assassination in those terms. We're told that we can't possibly know what drove a killer to plan and carry out a murder of the most prominent conservative activist in America. But that's a lie. We do know. The facts are plain and clear, and we have to speak truth in this moment, or there's no other side of the mountain. The vast majority of Americans are against political violence, but there is a vocal, active minority that encourages and celebrates it, and that minority is overwhelmingly on the left. Just last week, a YouGov poll found that a full 25% of those people who describe themselves as very liberal say it can be justified for citizens to use violence to achieve political goals. Less than 3% of very conservative Americans say the same. That's too many. That is 3% too many. But we are lying if we think that this is a both sides thing. It's not. We have to confront it. And you're going to have an important job of rooting out these terrorists. This is an ideology that runs very deep. The numbers are virtually identical to the ones I just noted when it comes to whether or not it's okay to celebrate the deaths of people whom we disagree with. And while large majorities in both parties were opposed to celebrating political violence, Democrats overall were nearly twice as likely as Republicans to believe that it is usually or always acceptable to celebrate the death of a public figure they oppose. What in the hell is going on? Earlier this year, a poll found that more than 55% of people on the left believed that it would be at least somewhat justified to murder Donald Trump. These are not just some abstractions on a page. These are our fellow citizens. How can we come together with people who believe these things? We've all seen the flood of posts on social media over the past week, not just a fringe few, but thousands upon thousands of people gleefully celebrating a father of two young children getting gunned down in broad daylight. I wish I wouldn't have seen that video. I wish my kids would not have seen that video. Blue Sky, the left-wing alternative to X, was so overwhelmed with these posts that the platform was forced to issue a statement warning its users to stop glorifying the murder. And it wasn't just random social media trolls. It was journalists, elite college professors, and even politicians, all but saying Charlie's assassination was justified because of what he thought, because of what he said. We saw the flood of hit pieces, the most powerful media outlets in the nation dishonestly attacking and villainizing Charlie for the most vicious possible terms. How can you ask us to unite under that? There can be no unity between good and evil. Somebody has to win this thing.
Give me a break. We have asked to meet with Thune and Johnson for over 6 weeks, over and over again.
Hey, Maryland, today is National Voter Registration Day.
And as Maryland Democrats, we're calling on you
to make sure that you and your community are registered to vote.
It only takes 2 minutes to check your voter registration status at iwillvote.com.
Here's the truth. you're not registered as a Democrat,
you won't have a say in the June Democratic primary.
And that is how you have a say who's on the ballot in November.
Every conversation matters. Every vote matters.
Remember, text your friends.
Call your family.
Remind your community.
Make sure your voice is heard on primary election day.
So take action by visiting iwillvote.com today.
Let's do this, Maryland.
Let's be clear here. The Democrats want to shut the government down. They're in a total chaotic situation, and they think the only way to appease their base is probably to shut it down. What Mike Johnson has done as our speaker throughout the year has always been able to bring this caucus together to push some common sense forward. And, of course, the president has been leading that charge. And so I think we'll work this thing out. But, again, we have to work under the assumption, given the rhetoric from the Democrats for weeks now, that they're okay with shutting down the government. We're not, and we're going to do everything in our power in a common sense way to protect taxpayers to keep the government open.
I just flew in from Israel a few hours ago where I had a chance to go to the city of David and be a part of an important ceremony where they've uncovered some amazing archaeological discoveries from the Pool of Siloam and then about 600 plus yards of steps that go up to the Temple Mount. What an honor to be there with Secretary Rubio, who gave great remarks, Ambassador Huckabee, similarly, who shared the historic significance as well as the importance of the relationship between the United States and Israel. It's a faith-building moment. I hope many will go online and see what's being discovered in Israel, going back 3,000 years to King David. What has been written in the Bible is now coming true with the archaeology. It was a great opportunity to see this firsthand, to witness excavations that are now uncovering the history of the Bible, the history of the base of the Judeo-Christian faith. Grateful for what they're doing in Jerusalem. They're just outside the ancient walls of the old city of Jerusalem.
You are not denying that FBI agents who are on the task force that fight against Russian oligarchs have not been reassigned. Public Correction Squad reassigned. People who defend us, defend children reassigned. You're not denying that. I've seen you time and time again attack my colleagues' premises of questions as a way to not answer the question. So let me end with this. I believe you have made our country weaker and less safe. I believe that we are more vulnerable to a major event, and I pray to God it doesn't happen. You've gutted the Bureau of Institutional Knowledge and Expertise. You fired or pushed out seasoned FBI officials, many with more than 20 years of experience, purging thousands of serious law enforcement officials who spent their careers keeping us safe, only to lower hiring standards in order to find anyone to replace them. And shockingly, you admitted in this hearing to Senator Coons that it would take 14 years to fill the vacancies at your agency. Many are the result of your purge. 20% of FBI agents are doing low-level immigration enforcement instead of their mission-critical work. You've disbanded entire task forces that stop election interference, foreign influence, public corruption. And who benefits from this? Well, corrupt people benefit from it. Criminals benefit from it. Vladimir Putin benefits from it. And it really makes me wonder who you're looking out for. It makes me think we can't trust you as a nation. You swear to release the Epstein files, but now you're withholding the Epstein files. You claim that you have a suspect in a serious assassination. Whoops, then you don't have a suspect. You know nothing about plans to remove FBI agents, yet you're directly involved in those plans. In the words of an ex-FBI official, you are overseeing, and I quote, generational destruction of the nation's premier law enforcement agency. Mr. Patel, in just 8 months, you have assaulted the institutional integrity of the FBI. But I know FBI field agents. I've worked with them in Newark. No matter how truly bad you are, you can't undermine the legacy of agents who fight every day to keep us safe, but you can tarnish the integrity of the agency and undermine the agency's capacity. I believe you're failing as a leader, and that your failure does have serious implications for the safety and security of Americans and our families.
What are some of the things that, non-governmental organizations like the faith community, churches, and others can do in the state of Tennessee, particularly, specifically speaking about Memphis, as this reset is going to take place?
Sure. Well, I think, you know, as is true for the nation, I think it's equally true for Memphis, or more so. We need a revival of faith in Memphis, Tennessee, and a revival of the values that are fundamental to the Christian faith. And until we have that, the founders correctly observed that democracy, the republic, could only survive if we had a moral people. And I think you see that on display in places like Memphis, Tennessee, where we've seen society degrade, we've seen morality brought into question. And I think for those who advocate for a world where faith is less important, they need to take heed of what happens in places like Memphis when you see those institutions decline.
Thank you, Chairman. And thank you to all my colleagues today, and also the press, for covering this very important issue. This ruling is a green light for racial profiling. Ultimately, that means harassment of law-abiding people, including U.S. citizens. The ruling says basically that law enforcement can treat entire communities of people as suspects, not because of what they've done, but because of the color of their skin, where they work, how they speak English, how they sound. This is not, quote unquote, reasonable suspicion. It's prejudice and it's racism that's being legalized. The court made this sweeping change on what's called its shadow docket. No full hearing, no transparency. The credibility of the Supreme Court has even been brought up by other judges, both Republican and Democratic appointees, who have noted that the Supreme Court is increasingly unwilling to explain itself when it overturns lower court rulings. The impacts of this ruling are not abstract. They're very real, and they gut the Fourth Amendment. And we're seeing the impacts right now. Every single American, regardless of who you are, should be concerned by this. Families will continue to fear going to work, kids will fear going to school, and hardworking folks who contribute to our economy, our communities, and our country will hide and step back from public life just to stay safe. I have heard from so many people all over San Antonio, all over Texas, and different parts of the country, in immigrant communities, and also employers, who have said that even U.S. citizens, even legal permanent residents, are now frightened to show up for work, frightened to send their kids to school. So we demand clear limits on law enforcement power, real oversight, and a commitment to the notion that we see individuals, not harmful and racist stereotypes, when we look at Latinos and others in this country. We join Justice Sotomayor, Kagan, and Brown Jackson in saying, I dissent. I dissent to attacks on the Fourth Amendment, individual liberties, and our democracy.
Maybe you saw me grilling RFK Jr. last week, but there's one thing we didn't have time to talk about. The Trump administration is cutting health insurance for 15 million people. Can anybody tell me how ripping away healthcare coverage from millions will make America healthy again? Look, when you cut health insurance for that many people, everyone gets hurt. Not just the people on a particular program. And we're already seeing the impact. This year, insurance companies are raising premiums by more than they have in years because of these cuts. It's sick. I'm fighting to restore people's health care because I believe that everyone, and I mean everyone, should have access to high-quality, affordable health care.
On this vote, the yeas are 200, the nays are 198. The motion is adopted without objection. The motion to reconsider laid upon the table.
I asked you this last time you were here. Cash, you remember Mr. Peter Strzok and Ms. Lisa Page?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Strzok was an FBI agent. Ms. Page was an FBI lawyer. They were both very aggressive anti-Trump political activists. who allowed their political opinions to affect their work at the FBI. Is that a fair statement?
I believe their text messages and their testimony that was secured by the OIG and DOJ speak for themselves.
In fact, Mr. Strzok and Ms. Page were having an extramarital affair, and at one point, Ms. Page texted Mr. Strzok, quote, "Trump's not ever going to be president, right? Right?" And Mr. Strzok replied, "No, he won't. We will stop it," end quote. Ms. Page resigned from the FBI. Mr. Strzok was fired. They promptly sued the federal government and the FBI and Justice Department for releasing their emails, which revealed all of this. The FBI settled that lawsuit for $1.2 million, gave Mr. Strzok $1.2 million cash, gave Ms. Page, who resigned. She wasn't fired, she resigned, she quit. Gave her $800,000. Who, if the FBI made that decision to give them money?
That settlement was reached in the Biden administration when my predecessor was the director.
Who? Are you saying that Chris Wray did?
The only people that can decide that settlement are the Attorney General in conjunction with the director and the administration.
Okay, so you're telling me that Attorney General Garland and Director Wray decided to give them the money. Is
Yes,
that
sir.
right?
Yes, sir.
My name is Meredith Hallwig. I serve on the Wyoming Board of Agriculture, representing the southeast region of Wyoming.
I'm Faith Hamlin, and I operate my family's cattle ranch in Bondurant, Wyoming.
I am Amanda McGinnis from Southwest Wyoming. My husband and I ranch on a small ranch with 3 small children.
Wyoming ranchers truly appreciate what has been done. Thank you to all of our congressmen and women. The death tax has truly been something our Wyoming ranchers have needed.
Working ranches, the ones that are putting the food on the table, need these kinds of breaks so that they're not having to sell off a portion to cover those taxes.
It really helps our generational ranchers pass on to that next generation and make sure that that operation stays in ranching and farming in our great state of Wyoming.
This is a critical piece for us as we look not just into tomorrow or the next day, but into the next generation to carry on our legacy and the land for our family.
I want to remind our Republican colleagues that crime in D.C. over the last few years has actually been going down. And quite frankly, the idea that we're now going to put middle schoolers in prison, this should be called the Middle Schoolers for Prison Act, is inhumane and shameful. We can all agree that crime should be taken on, that D.C. and other cities we want to make safer. But this idea that we're going to penalize children in middle school at the age of 14 and put them in prison is irresponsible and, quite frankly, it's un-American. I want to remind my colleagues that at this moment, what we're doing right now is stripping 700,000 residents who have come together in D.C. to create laws, to bring community together, to fight for statehood and representation. We're going to strip them from their ability to manage their own city. These efforts do nothing to reduce crime or improve public safety. And once again, I know that the president is obsessed with Washington, D.C. He's obsessed with its local laws. I ask him once again, he should step down as president and run for mayor if he's so interested.
We are in Virginia 5 with John McGuire. We are here at a restaurant.
No tax on tips. These things certainly help this business.
I am here with Jen Kiggins in Virginia's 2nd District at QED, where they do a lot of ship repairs.
Places like this, they're an integral part of our defense manufacturing space, keeping our United States Navy fleet active.
We are here with Rob Whitman in Virginia's 1. We're pumping their gas and we're giving them their gas for free.
We are here at a compressor station. This is really about making sure people know what is in the working family tax cut bill.
This rule further erodes the system of checks and balances that has served our democracy so well. Republicans, through it, are surrendering more and more unrestrained power to President Trump. This rule is but another step on the march to tyranny. Trump is seeking to create a master file of information on every single American. A digital ID tracking your movements, where you live, where you work, when you see a doctor, how much money you have, even child support agreements, and much more. Today, Republicans are simply rubber stamping that plan, the very kind of surveillance and intrusion that libertarians have always opposed. Today, these Republicans are blocking us from presenting any resolution of inquiry concerning the Trump administration, like the one that I introduced on June the 11th, to demand the facts from the administration about all of its wrongdoing, including what confidential information it has accumulated on each American. Your data becomes fully public and available to President Trump, even as the Epstein files remain fully buried. Republicans are keeping the American people ignorant of what Trump is doing with their private data, ignorant of how he may use it against his political enemies or his business competitors, ignorant of what he may do if you've ever expressed any criticism of him, his family, his policies, or maybe you just expressed support for someone that with his latest whim he is opposed to. Now he will have a master file that includes you to persecute and even prosecute. Too intimidated by this self-proclaimed king, Republicans are empowering what could become a police state. To shed light on this descent into authoritarian darkness, to let the American people know how their own government is centralizing their personal data, I introduced a resolution of inquiry demanding that the administration produce all the information related to the creation of this vast searchable database with its hand-picked contractor, Palantir, a company that one Silicon Valley executive accused of building the infrastructure of the police state. I do agree with one Republican, Representative Warren Davidson, who does believe in freedom and has described Trump's deal with Palantir as dangerous, and has said when you start combining all these data points on individuals into one database, it really essentially creates a digital ID, and it's a power that history says will eventually be abused, and with this administration eventually will be very soon. A vote for this rule is a vote to bury the truth and allow the federal government to track Americans and invade their privacy with no restraint. I strongly urge my colleagues to stand up for freedom and reject this rule, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sounds like my case and salesmanship is going to be modest with the support that this act enjoys from colleagues on both sides of the aisle. But I am someone who has built a business from the ground up, including several million square feet of space. And it is a reality that to construct space is one thing, the carry cost of maintaining it is quite another. And there is general recognition increasingly within this Congress that we have more space than our federal government needs. And that's certainly the case at the courthouse level in our federal courthouses and the supporting office space. My legislation, the CASE Act, directs our GSA to construct the courthouse space that is necessary and no more. I worked with the U.S. courts on this bill. The resulting legislation is straightforward. It is clearly bipartisan, and it's commonsensical. The CASE Act codifies the court's sharing policies for our magistrate seniors and bankruptcy judges. For the larger courthouses, it limits the number of courtrooms to 2 for every 3 judges. The bill codifies this administration's approach to right-sizing our federal government, and that's something that we share in common both sides of the aisle toward being good stewards of our taxpayers' dollars. The GSA, as was noted, is still forced to build standards that account for potential judges, that despite Congress not having authorized any additional judgeships over the past 30 years. This act is a move toward making taxpayer dollars go further. I want to thank my colleague, Ms. Norton, for joining me on this legislation and for her good work on this issue. I urge passage, and with that, I yield back.
I bet you were waiting for that box to hit me, weren't you? Well, I'm waiting for Donald Trump to explain to the American people the cost of deploying the National Guard, not just to our pocketbooks, but the opportunity cost when we know, as we're entering hurricane season, how much we need National Guard for deployment to help keep us safe, to help address disasters throughout the country. And let's face it, we've got a lot of volunteers in the National Guard who need to be working in their jobs, supporting their families. There's a huge cost to our country in these deployments. And the problem is we don't know enough about it. And that's why I introduced the Safeguarding Our Use of National Guard Act, or SUN Act. And today, Senator Padilla is introducing a companion measure, the same bill in the Senate side. Together, we are demanding, along with dozens of others who have joined the bill, demanding that this administration help us understand what the real cost is of these military deployments in our cities, and define very clearly and explicitly what the legal justification is for these deployments. Why? Because we know that these deployments are illegal. We know it's unlawful to be using military for civilian law enforcement for a lot of reasons. This is exactly what our founders feared, is the deployment of standing armies in the United States on American soil against Americans. So we should have answers. If there's nothing to hide, then let's let the sun in.
Here we got 6,000 Americans working hard to build the biggest data center in the world. This was all grass about a year and a half ago. You see around me here, we've got gas turbines on site generating their own power. They've got their own power plant, their own labor force. These are good paying jobs, over 6,000 of them. We're gonna have to do this a dozen times around the country to meet our processing need. Let's get to work.
I think to myself, what would Carl Levin do? WWCLD. What would Carl Levin do when faced with really difficult questions, essential questions of our democracy? He was never one to simply complain, right? He was not going to do what we call at the Pentagon admiring the problem, talking about it and examining it, but then not doing anything about it. He was someone who acted. And his primary way of acting was through his passion, which was investigations, right? He served on important committees that helped expose the loopholes that the executive branch and other powerful people were exploiting to get ahead. He would want right now Congress to reassert its Article 1 powers, just the basic things that are in the Constitution, that the Congress has the power of the purse and the executive must work with, not against the Congress if they want money and to make financial decisions. We're seeing these kinds of abuses that would have him turn in his grave in real time. Attacking independent organizations like the Fed and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, deploying the military in American streets, refusing to spend congressionally appropriated funds and usurping the power of the purse, personally profiting off the presidency would really irk him. And the president has become, we believe, a billionaire in the meme coin that he has issued. This would really turn Carl over. He hated when people got rich off the backs of the taxpayer. He would be leading the charge if he was here to fix these issues. He'd be investigating all of these things, and he'd be building support for the legislation to close those loopholes. He spent nearly a decade investigating how corporations and individuals were using tax loopholes to avoid paying near $100 billion in taxes. And one of his most famous investigations was on Enron, right? Seems like 100 years ago, but on Enron, where Enron had massive debts and inflated earnings. He introduced a legislation to close what's now called the Enron loophole, which allowed many of these abuses. And he fought hard to pass it. He built coalitions to pass it, including across the aisle, and eventually succeeded overcoming a presidential veto, which is not an easy thing to do. But I think that Carl would also recognize in a very twisted way that what Trump and those around him are doing provides us actually a roadmap of where we need to make government oversight stronger.